Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce some of our more distinguished guests. Mayor Bookmeyer, Mason City is here. Representatives Henry Rayon, Linda Upmeyer here. Senator Merlin Bartz is here. Former mayor and former state representative Bill Schickel is here. And Worth County Supervisor Ken Abrams is also here. Did I miss anybody? Can you hear me, everybody? Okay. Today, Iowa is at an economic crossroads, and how our leaders deal with it will have lasting and far-reaching repercussions for decades to come. Last fall, Iowans handed Chet Culver the worst defeat of any incumbent governor since Dan Turner was tossed out way back in 1932. Terry Branstad, at that time, carries 90 out of 99 counties and won a mandate to restore Iowa to the administrative responsibility which enabled him to leave office in 1999 with $1 billion surplus in our state's treasury. In contrast, balancing the last budget of Governor Culver, he had to raid the trust fund for $1 billion. But none of this seems to matter to the Democrats in Iowa Senate, who are now blocking the will of those who pay their salaries. Mike Gronstal and the Senate Democrats are simply not serious about the financial mess that we're facing. Those of you here today, you are the people who pay the most in taxes and obey the laws. And you are the ones who make Iowa the great state that it is. It's from your ranks that Terry Branstad comes, and on your side he stands. He's here with us today in Mason City to share with us and you his efforts to restore fiscal sanity to the government we support and to address a number of other issues which are of concern to all Iowans. It's my pleasure to introduce to you at this time Iowa's Governor, Terry Branstad. Thank you.
Gary Blodgett, thank you very much. I appreciate that very nice introduction. I'm glad to be back, but it's kind of where we started it all out in our campaign swing. We stopped at this very location, and I want to say thank you to the people of Saragordo County and the people of Iowa for giving me the opportunity to serve you again. I made a commitment that I would get the state's financial house in order, and I want to thank Linda Upmeyer, who's our majority leader in the House, and also her colleagues, Henry Rayons and Senator Bartz, for their cooperation and their help. We worked hard. We inherited a mess, as Gary mentioned, and they use a lot of financial tricks and bad budgeting products, including using one-time money from things like the Senior Living Trust Fund, which has now been depleted, using one-time money to pay for Medicaid to the tune of $540 million, purposely underfunding entitlement programs like indigent defense. It pays the attorneys that are court-appointed to represent indigent criminal defendants. And I promise to straighten all of that out. I'm not the only governor that's got a challenge, and I don't know, it might be interesting for you to know that today, Jerry Brown, the Democratic governor of California, vetoed the appropriation bill that the Democratic legislature in California passed because it was full of budget gimmicks. That's the same message I've been telling the Democrats in Iowa. When you have a Democratic governor in California that says, enough's enough, we've got to get the financial house in order. Of course, California's got much bigger problems than we do, thank God. But we did inherit a mess. I want to share with you a little bit of what we inherited and how we've gone about straightening it out. First of all, last year, as I mentioned, they used one-time money for indigent defense and for Medicaid, but they also they left to the governor $84 million of unallocated budget cuts, which he was supposed to do in the report to the legislature before December 1st. Well, Governor Culver didn't do that until January 3rd, a week before leaving office. And then what he did was 84 million, 40 million of which would have jeopardized health and safety. And so we had to go back with a supplemental appropriation to prevent people from being released from mental health institutes and prisons to protect public health and safety in this state. And I'm proud to say the legislature did that. We also had to, since they had underfunded the indigent defense, we had lawyers starting in January that had been court appointed that had performed their responsibilities and weren't getting paid. Well, it took us several months to finally get that resolved between the House and the Senate, but we got that done. Well, then we went about putting together a 2-year budget, a sustainable budget, spending less than we take in each year. And I want to say that it wasn't easy when you got to spend less than you're taking in and less than the previous years. That it's not going to make everybody happy. But I think we did it in a very thoughtful and systematic way. And we also made a commitment that we were going to fulfill the state's obligations to the taxpayers through the school aid formula. Because last year, the legislature purposely underfunded school aid by $216 million. That just pushed that onto local school districts to have to raise property taxes. And the year before it was even worse. That's the year that Governor Culver in October cut 10% across the board and pushed that burden onto property taxes at the local level. That's why we've had these massive property tax increases, and that's why we promised to do something about it. And so in this budget, we not only have a budget that's a sustainable budget, and it's a budget for 2 years, and the reason why we need a 2-year budget is so you don't push things off into the next year like they did with indigent defense, and then have a big budget cliff to have to deal with the next year. And you've seen that the last several years. That's what we promised to correct. And this legislature, and I want to say, the House has last week come back and passed a comprehensive budget that does give us a sustainable budget. The budget I put together, we put a 5-year estimate in on all revenues and expenditures, and it spends less than we take in each year. It's sustainable for the long term. The House passed that. They also passed comprehensive property tax reform, which not only reduces the commercial property tax, which has been talked about but no action has been taken on for decades, and it does provide reimbursement to local governments, protect them from losing in that process, but it also limits residential and agriculture property. And that's really important right now because of the way, and I just think Josh Burns is here too. Josh, thank you, another one of our new Republican representatives. But what it does, because the way that we value farmland based on productivity, and this goes way back to the 1970s, in the 70s we were having this big increase in farmland valuations because people were buying farmland as a hedge against inflation, not because it produced enough to really, because commodity prices weren't that high back in the 70s. But what we did then is we changed it, instead of valuing farmland based on market value, to productivity. Use a 5-year rolling average looking at yields and commodity prices. Lowell Norland, you may remember, was a representative from this area, from Northwood at the time. He chaired the Ways and Means Committee, and he said, well, we should tie ag and residential together so there won't be a shift from ag to residential. So we did that. That caused the rollback. And so from 1978 till now, residential rolled back from 100% of market value to last year 46.7. But now with this 5-year rolling average and those $2 corn dropping off and $7 coming on, the productivity value for farmland's going up, and with it, since residential's tied to it, it's going up too. And it went from 46.7 to 48.5, and can go up now 4% a year, and it's going to go from 48.5 to 52.5 to 56.5 to 60.5 to 64.5 to 68.5 in 5 years. This will mean a $1.3 billion increase in property taxes if we don't take action. But in the House-passed bill, fully funding the school aid formula, limiting that increase to no more than 2%, we can prevent the property tax increase for ag and residential, while at the same time providing $50 million more in property tax relief to replace the commercial property tax as we phase that down from 100% to 75% in 5 years. And I would like to see us go another 3 years to 8 years and we get to 60%, which at least finally gets us competitive with our neighboring states in terms, and that's what we need to attract business and jobs to the state of Iowa. My primary focus as governor is to bring jobs and business to our state. And the other thing I want to say that's going to help on that is what we're doing in regulatory reform. Merlin's played a key role on that because the House and Senate both have helped us with this, House and Senate Republicans. We've had hearings around the state and identified some of the areas where state regulations are damaging business and local communities. And I've already vetoed the so-called rice rule that would require local communities to retrofit these generators that are only used very little at a tremendous amount of cost to utility payers. And we've also signed an executive order requiring all new state regulations to have a jobs impact statement. We're going to do a rolling sunset on all the existing regulations and do a cost-benefit analysis to see what ones are needed and what ones can be streamlined or at least avoid unintended consequences that are an impediment to job creation. These are the things that I think are critically important to be approved, and of course our fiscal year ends on June 30th. Now, as long as I can ever remember, we have always met the deadline of passing a budget before the end of the fiscal year. Now, the federal government didn't pass a budget at all last year. They also spent 40% more than we had in revenue, increased the national debt by $1.6 trillion. That's the reason why the country's in trouble. And our state, I think, has got to make the tough decisions, pass a budget that is sustainable for the long term, and one that does prevent the property tax increase. And finally, the House has passed this. We need the Senate to pass the Partnership for Economic Progress. This would give us an effective public-private partnership to market and promote Iowa. You know, Des Moines had a partnership for about 5 years, and they've had great success with it. Sioux City has. Dubuque has. All of those communities, with involving the public sector with the private sector, have been very successful in economic development. We have something called the Innovation Council with some of the most innovative companies in Iowa, companies like Monsanto and Pioneer DuPont and Rockwell Collins and Kemen, and we want those people involved in the strategic plan for economic development in the state, in helping us financially to market and promote the state, while at the same time teaming that with our professional developers like Debbie Durham, that's heading their economic development program, so that we can be really successful and aggressive in telling the Iowa story. And I can tell you there's great things going on already. Cargill has recently announced what they're going to do at Fort Dodge. There'll be another complex like Eddyville, a biosciences complex, and it's not going to end with just their plant. There'll be several others that will co-locate there with them. Because agriculture is such a strong part of the Iowa economy, if we can make the tax and regulatory changes that we need, Iowa will be positioned very well to be able to get those biosciences jobs located here. Many people want to move from products that are based on petroleum to bio-based products. We in Iowa, because we produce the raw materials, because we have the research and development tax credit, because the money we've invested in research in biosciences, are positioned very well to see a lot of that growth in our state. And that's an area that we're going to be aggressively working on. So I guess my message to you is, I learned a long time ago, the way you get things done in Iowa is not twisting the arms of legislators, but instead going to the people and convincing the people of Iowa that we have the right policies and the right program to bring growth and prosperity, and to make sure that we're meeting our financial obligations and doing it in a fiscally responsible way. So I'm asking you to call on our Democratic colleagues in the legislature. Ask them to join the governor and the Republicans in both the House and the Senate who are with us on this. We have 60 Republicans in the House. We only have 24 in the Senate. and it takes 26 votes. So we don't need every Democrat, but we do need a bipartisan approach in the Senate. We need Senator Branstad to give his caucus members an opportunity to vote on these important issues. And I know there are members of that caucus that are interested in working with us to resolve these issues in terms of budget and taxes and the focus on jobs. With that, I just want to say this is my last of 43 community visits that I've done. And you know, I was supposed to be on a trade mission to China, and I want you to know that I stayed home and we sent the Lieutenant Governor, and she gets home tonight. But Kim Reynolds and Debbie Durham and the Secretary of Agriculture, Bill Northey, the Insurance Commissioner, Susan Voss, and our 41 Iowans on this trade mission. And I've heard great things from their stops in South Korea, and I'm anxious to hear how the thing in China has gone. But I just think there's great opportunities there, and we do work as a team. And so I just want to say I'm glad that I stayed home, because I'm not going to have the jet lag they're going to have the next several days. But I do appreciate that the fact that we have a real team, and that Kim and Debbie and the whole crew have really been there and represented Iowa very well. With that, we'll just say thank you, and I'll be glad to respond to questions. Thank you very much.
I sure appreciate the flag on your lapel.
Yes, sir.
We've got a few leaders in this country that don't believe in doing that.
Well, and let me also say, you know, I've been to 5 funerals for a military since I've been governor. And I felt one of the things you need to do as governor is to show your support for the men and women that are serving our country. We have more National Guard deployed from Iowa right now anytime since World War II. And so I just felt, as governor, I need to be there. And I also want you to know, having gone to those funerals, many locations around the state of Iowa, it's a heartwarming experience to see the support from the public. People are there not only wearing flag pins, but carrying flags with signs of support. The motorcycle honor guard, in the one at the funeral I went to in Waverly, there were over 500 of them. And all the way from the funeral, from the memorial service at Waverly Shell Rock High School to the cemetery in Cedar Falls, there were people lined up along the roads just to show their support, respect, and appreciation. So that says something, I think, about the kind of people we have in Iowa, the respect and appreciation for the people that are making that sacrifice. Yesterday I addressed Boys State down at Camp Dodge. And you know, that's a great program as well for young people. And for that matter, so is Girls State. Those are both great programs that I think we can be proud of. So thanks for your comment. Are there other questions? Yes, sir.
As you wrestle with the budget issues,
Yep.
where does the income tax factor into your thinking, both personal tax rates and corporate income tax rates?
Well, I would like to see them lower, but at this time, first of all, we have kept federal deductibility, and that's important because, at least in Iowa, you don't get a tax on the tax. And when I was governor before, we did cut the income tax actually from 13% to 8.98% and kept federal deductibility. We also eliminated inheritance tax for spouses, children, and grandchildren. The legislature has been, over the last 6 years, phasing out the tax on Social Security benefits. We have 2 more years to go. I think 2014, that is completed. I would like to see us also phase out the tax on retirement benefits in addition to that. Now, we exempt the first $6,000 per individual, $12,000 per couple in retirement benefits, but we're one of only 13 states that taxes retirement benefits. A lot of people leave here in retirement because you can go to Texas or Florida, places like that, no income tax, and not pay it at all. But so in the long term, I think we need to continue to reduce that. But right now, I think the biggest impediment that I've zeroed in on is the commercial property tax, because that's what affects our Main Street businesses. That's what makes it hard to attract business and jobs to Iowa. And I believe we would send a really good signal to the business community and to existing businesses and entrepreneurs that we're trying to attract. If we got, and that's why we've made that such a centerpiece. The other thing that's been talked about for years, you may remember Governor Culver even appointed a task force. They had all kinds of meetings, but in the end they didn't take any action. Other questions?
Planning on running 3 or 4 more times?
Listen, I'm less than 6 months into this term. It's a 4-year term. Way too early to talk about that. But let me just say this. I'm glad that I did run again. I felt a calling. I love this state, and I just felt we needed to get our financial house in order. We need to put the focus back on jobs. I think the timing is right for good things to happen in Iowa. I am very excited about the fact that agriculture is so strong now. And we just need to find ways to build on it and be able to process and create things from what we produce here. And I think we can build a very prosperous, growing economy in this state. But we have to get, first of all, our state's budget in order. We need to have tax and regulatory structure to be inducive and supportive of that. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah. Realistically, what do you think needs to happen between now and the end of the month to get the budget? Not idealistically, but realistically.
Okay. Well, I think the message needs to get across to the Senate Democrats that we are sincere about, and Linda can probably respond to this too, but the House and the governor and the Republicans in the Senate are sincere about having a sustainable budget. And we know we can't do everything that everybody wants, but we work very diligently to try to make sure that we are meeting our obligations on things like the entitlement programs and that we are fully funding them so we won't have the kind of disruptions that we've had in the past. And secondly, we do want to make sure that we do something that's not been done for 33 years, and that is move the property tax in the right direction, reducing it for everybody, for all classes of property, but especially the commercial property tax, which is the highest in the country. And I believe that's starting to work. I'm getting feedback from people that are saying that, your message is getting across. And yet, in fact, we've had several meetings with Senator Branstad privately, and we thought we'd made progress. Then we find out, then he goes back and comes back with more spending. Well, and so we've had some private discussions. We will continue to. And I've had my staff, my chief of staff, Jeff Boink, and Dave Roeder actively involved in that. But I also have met with him twice privately, once in Council Bluffs and the other day in my office. We're going to do more of that in the coming days. But and the speaker and I will meet directly with him. But in the end, we have to have a majority of the Senate, and I think he's got some very liberals in his caucus, very liberal people in his caucus that want to continue to spend and continue to do things the way they have done them the last 4 years. And I think the people of Iowa spoke loud and clear. No, we want new leadership. We want a new direction, and I think that message is starting to get across. But it's a difficult one. I mean, when Jerry Brown in California said the same thing, and he's got a Democratic legislature, and he had to veto the whole budget to get the message across. So we're not alone, and our problems aren't as big as California or Illinois or some of these states, but we're dead serious about doing exactly what I said I would do when I was here campaigning. It's not a surprise. I don't know, Linda, if you'd like to add anything.
Well, I think one thing, Governor, that's real important to know is that due to a variety of events, we had a lot of the budget funded with one-time dollars.
Yes.
And it's been a real challenge to get those expenses covered with dollars that are going to be ongoing dollars. But that's the one thing that we've all been very committed to, because one-time dollars for ongoing spending leaves us in a real bind when those one-time dollars are gone. So I appreciate your support in that, but that's been an important thing for all of us to do.
Well, and that means it's sustainable.
Right.
Otherwise, you got next year you got to try to scramble where you're going to try to come up with it, because last year you used one-time money and that's no longer available.
How much of that was stimulus money, federal stimulus?
A significant amount of it was, and there was also money used from the cash reserve, and there was money used from the Senior Living Trust Fund, even the snowmobile fund. They took money from everything they could find. It was pretty amazing. And then they just purposely underfunded things like indigent defense. The $84 million of unallocated cuts, which they just delegated to the governor, and then he didn't do, and just dropped that in our lap. Well, there's one other thing that made it even worse. You may recall, ever since we've had collective bargaining, when collective bargaining starts in November after the election, it's always been turned over to the new governor. So Governor Ray turned the responsibility over to me. I did to Bill Sack did for Culver. So we notified Culver after the election that we wanted to negotiate with the unions on the contract. Not only did he not turn it over to us, he took the first demand from AFSCME without any negotiations, just accepted it, and it's a 15% increase over 2 years for those people not at the top of their pay range, and it still leaves us with 84% of state employees getting all of their health insurance paid for by the state. These are things that I never would have agreed to, and nevertheless, we're stuck with that. And we got to pay for that out of the budget. We don't have any money for it. And so now the individual agencies have to pay for that. Plus, last year, you may recall, remember they gave that lucrative retirement plan? It was, if you'd worked for the state for 25 years, you got $25,000 bonus, plus the state would pay your health insurance for the next 5 years. But it wasn't paid in last year's budget. It's paid over the next 5 years. So they get $5,000 a year, plus the health insurance paid out, and those are coming out of those existing agency budgets. So that's the reason why we have the hiring freeze in place, and that's the reason why we've had to do the changes we've had in the budget. So we inherited a real big financial mess, and you know, and we're committed to straightening it out in this biennium. So that's not an easy thing to do, and I think when you make that kind of a change, and it took them a long time to really believe that we really meant what we said. But I think that's starting to sink in. Okay?
Anything else?
Well, I encourage you to visit with your legislators. I do want to thank the legislators that are here. I want to thank them for their diligence and hard work, but we need the others to work with us, because working together we can build a bright future in this state. I think we're on the threshold of some great things happening, but if we get our financial house in order, and then we also say there's some other good things coming this summer. We're going to be unveiling the Healthiest State in the Nation initiative, working with Hy-Vee and with Wellmark, and we want to set goals to be, and that'll be a great selling point for business too. We're also going to have this education summit, July 25th to 26th. It's a sellout. We're going to have 1,650 people there. We got Arnie Duncan, who's the U.S. Secretary of Education, as the keynote. We've got Chris Christie coming. We got my friend, former Governor Jim Hunt from North Carolina, who started the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. We think we can do some really good things to reform education in a way that focuses on improving student achievement and helps us better prepare teachers and administrators to be really effective leaders in education. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Governor. We appreciate your coming to share your views with us in Northern Iowa, and we wish you good luck in the future. You're welcome.
Thank you.